All right, Carolyn, I think we can start.
All right, wonderful. Well, welcome to the next webinar in our series for career technical education. I am Carolyn Zachary, and I am an education administrator and state director for the Adult Education Office at the California Department of Education. And today we're very pleased to talk about special populations and CTE and how we're helping those students in this whole world of distance learning. And so it is my distinct pleasure to introduce Tanette Salter, who is the Equity Analyst for the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee, known as JSPAC. And JSPAC is funded jointly between the CDE and the Chancellor's Office using our federal Perkins dollars. And Tanette, please.
Thank you for that introduction, and I am happy to be here and happy to talk about addressing the needs of special populations, which is very dear to my heart as well. As Carolyn mentioned, I am the Equity Analyst for JSPAC as the acronym for the Joint Special Populations Advisory Committee. We are an advisory committee made up of 26 representatives to include the CCCSE SA, which is the California Department of Education County Superintendent Service Association. Very long. We love long acronyms in education. And the California Community College Chancellor's Office, 7 consortia, as well as we have representatives from the public and non-private sector which are organizations that advocate for special populations. We are mandated by Perkins, as Carolyn mentioned, and our mission is to promote equity, access, and success in CTE for students from special populations. We do this by providing research-based professional learning, as in today's webinar. And those types of webinars and learning experiences can be informative, and today's webinar is informative to inform your strategic planning in addressing special population students' needs in CTE remote instruction. We also provide instructional strategies. Hopefully today you'll walk away with some guided ideas on strategies from some of our voices who are experiencing distant education today. Special populations, very quickly, is defined by Perkins 5, economically disadvantaged to include low income and youth and adults, individuals with disabilities. You'll hear from a parent of a student with special needs. English learners, you'll hear from a student, an ESL student and a CTL student. Single parents, that's including those who are expecting. Non-traditional fields, and that's basically 25% less of a particular gender in a particular industry or occupation. An example of that is advanced manufacturing representation of women. Foster youth, homeless foster youth who have aged out, and youth who have an active military parent. And lastly, the other special populations is out of workforce individuals. I do want to point out that because special populations is intersectional with marginalized, historically underrepresented students, we also focus on those as well as far as professional learning. I am so excited to have this conversation with COVID-19 expeditiously moving digital platforms as a primary education source for students, for parents, for us teachers, for our institutions. Faculty and teachers and students and parents at various levels in their training on being in the digital platform and trying to transform a meaningful virtual learning experience for all the above that I mentioned has had disappointments and has been kludgy. However, there is a silver lining through this all. There's hope. It's reimagining how we deliver education and how to do that effectively and meaningful, relational, relevant, and insightful, creating that authentic experience for faculty and teachers, as well as the student, as well as the parent. The mere terms alone, which is why we are doing this type of presentation, you'll meet my colleagues in a few minutes. The mere terms of distance education, CTE remote learning, correspondence learning, online learning, has a different meaning, and we'll present that today for each faculty, teacher, parent, student, district, class, can even be region and within the department. We are going to introduce you today in this webinar some new terms, not new words, but new terms. Crisis remote learning and intentional remote learning. We're going to share some national data prior to COVID-19 from the National Center of Statistics. We're going to share some current data, a snapshot of students enrolled in the California adult education programs based from a student technology intake survey. And lastly, and which is the heart of this presentation, is you're going to hear from those voices that are experiencing distance education. Thank you for having us, and let's begin. Addressing special populations in CTE remote learning. I just would like to take a quick pause because earlier I mentioned about those disappointments and I mentioned about the silver lining, hope. Dr. Martin Luther King says it best: we must accept finite disappointment, but never lose infinite hope. Let me introduce you to the hope. Just a reminder, this webinar is to inform and recommend guiding considerations for strategic continuing planning of CTE remote for special population students. Here is your presenters, your panelists, your provokers. Alexander Berry, he's a program manager from San Diego Continuing Education. Brian Boomer, Director of Grants, from West Hills Community College. Terry Brace, Director, Farm of the Future from West Hills. Diana Enriquez, Grant Development Specialist from West Hills. Falika Iwabu, she is the Adult Basic Education, Adult Secondary Education Department Program Chair and Career and College Readiness, and a lot of a title from San Diego Continuing Education. Renee Marshall, an administrator and an education consultant. You will hear from a student, Dulce Caldino de Nobilis. She's a student, an ESL student, and the CTE student, and a project assistant of San Diego Continuing Education. You'll hear from the parent of student special needs, Jessica Wilson. You'll hear from Larry Paredes, a CTE faculty from West Hills. And I already introduced myself. And Renee Marshall will be the next presenter.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much, Tanette. One of the first things we'd like to talk about is this idea of virtual space being an area where we really have a lot of different definitions. And part of this is because we are in something brand new in terms of education. It's kind of like a revolution. It's an exciting time. And as Tanette mentioned earlier, we have some challenges, but there are also lots of silver linings. So let's look at the infinite definitions. First off, providing opportunities where students don't have to see the instructor via email, mail, online. This is something where they don't have to go to a physical space to take training. And that's really new. Another one of our members said, spring 2020 distance education has different expectations than fall. It was anything we could do to help students continue learning the best we could. Looking forward to fall, synchronous and asynchronous, creating virtual lab environments. The answer would change for each student, institution, and department. Another definition is bringing CTE online to students, beautifully blended together across systems, across populations, truly redefining career technical education in a virtual space. We also see that virtual learning is looking at the individual student learning needs, not having to be physically on campus. There's flexibility. All materials are online, but there's also videos, types of demonstrations, and flexible lab times. And lastly, in terms of infinite definitions, we are creating a virtual learning experience that is different for every student. With that, we have Brian, who's going to be coming in for our next slide.
Yeah, thank you. So when we're talking about infinite definitions, as a collaborative group, we are really, the definitions just keep coming, and they really fall into two trend categories that we notice. Those being crisis remote learning and the other being intentional remote learning. So we tried to give some examples or put into words what crisis remote learning is. And what we thought about was it's really addressing access needs. You know, it's broadband, computers, laptop, food, you know, collecting physical mailing addresses, device needs, shifting and grading, you know, making sure faculty are prepared to teach online, and versus intentional remote learning, which kind of has a lens for the future and is a little more equity focused, which is really, instead of addressing access needs, it's addressing learning needs. So we're looking at engagement, creating content and curriculum that drives engagement, it bolsters relationships, it provides connection from students to faculty, but also between student peer groups. And I think what's interesting is this growing idea of marry education, which is meaningful, engaging, relational, relevant, and insightful learning. So as we're moving from crisis remote learning, and obviously those factors have to be in place to achieve an intentional remote learning. Can we go to the next slide? So now we'll put it to you, the group that we're presenting to. You can feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box, preferably the chat box, and identify for your school, county, institution, what have you, specific to remote learning. Are you using crisis remote learning? Are you using intentional remote learning? In a lot of cases, I'm sure there's a little bit of both. Certainly when we all started in March, we went into crisis remote learning nationwide, if not worldwide, but we've had some time. So how do we take those steps to ensure that the needs of students to get online are met, and how do we move into intentional remote learning? And if we bring this back to the quote of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. at the beginning, we start to think of crisis remote learning as being finite, as it takes care of the here and now, but doesn't really look forward. And the intentional remote learning being more of the infinite. It's gonna support student success, especially with an equity mindset or from an equity framework for CTE students in a remote learning environment. Up next for the next slide is Diana Enriquez, my colleague at West Hills College.
Hello, everybody. And I'm going to be providing some of the data that we had prior to COVID, and it talks about the number of students enrolled in offered courses entirely online from 2015 to 2016. These numbers include primary 1,700, middle school we're looking at 1,800, high school 10,300, and the combined K through 12 is 5,300. Next slide, please. And like we see here, the number of students enrolled in any distance learning during the 2017-2018 is 6,932,074. This year, we know that that number has increased dramatically, and we're looking for more ways to help our students continue. Thank you.
Okay, that brings me back to discuss this current data that is from California Adult Education Program students technology survey of students who answered to, and there was about 1,600 responses. So these numbers are estimates, I will say that, but it gives you a a glimpse of the student lens. And so in the student technology survey, there were several questions that were presented, but our group decided to choose these particular areas. There was questions about, have you ever taken a class online? How do you feel? Where's the best place for you to study? What is it that you need? So in terms of this particular data, we felt that it was important to show you that 61% of our students use their phone to access the internet. So that's 61% of the 1,600 students from that particular survey. The tablet, 22% said that they accessed the Wi-Fi from their tablet. And laptop and computer, it's 74%. And the reason why those asterisks are by is because similar students who use their mobile also use the laptop and computer. Do not have that data to disaggregate yet from that, but it was interesting that they used both. We felt as a collaborative group that when you look at how we lens in administrator and education, to think about how they access the Wi-Fi from their mobile. But then when you look at that infinite hope, when I earlier talked about we were forced basically to deliver education in a different mode, which is a digital platform. And as we're concerned about our students, concerned about their experience, and would they continue? But out of 1,600 students, 99% of them said, I can continue to learn online. That is truly a silver lining in the way, in the future of how we deliver instruction. The next slide would be Alexander. This is the meat, the voices that you'll hear from, their experiences of distance education. We can pause at this moment and take a couple of questions before we get into the meat, or we can move forward with this.
So far, our questions tonight are more focused around, can they access the reports you've been sharing, and can they access the slide deck? And so what I've been telling the audience is to reach out directly to the panelists. So maybe at the end of this we can discuss which is the best email to use for that information.
One of us will put the email to put in. It's jspec.caperkins@gmail.com. And thank you for that. I'm going to stop everyone and go to the voice, to the student voice. I'm sorry, forgive me. The next person that will be presenting is Larry Paredes. He will share with you his examples of difficulties in distance education. He's the CTE faculty from West Hills, and he will also share an infinite silver lining.
Hello, everybody from Colina, California. I've been asked to share my experience with teaching a distant education class, and here at West Hills, we started a distance education class out in Fireball. Just to put in perspective what area we cover here at West Hills, we cover over 3,500 square miles of area, and that's quite a distance for some of our students to get to our main campus. So when we established a distance education class, we wanted to make accessible some of the skills that some of the students might not be able to have by not being able to coming to the main campus. In this case would be welding. So we established a distance welding class. We had a facility at Fireball High School where students could come in and do a lot of their welds, being watched over by an assistant, but I was actually running the class. There were some issues that I will share that that caused some of the students to have some difficulty, but we found solutions. Some of those difficulties were the internet. We have a great deal of students that didn't have access to reliable internet. That was one issue. Another issue was some didn't have access to computers. And another one was that a lot of them were first time coming to college and were unfamiliar with Canvas. But we found solutions for all those. Some of those solutions or silver linings was the cell phone. Just like if you found shared in the data, the cell phone was a great source of getting their welds where I could see them to me. I know some instructors maybe are uncomfortable of giving their cell phone number out, but in my case, we were kind of inventing the wheel as we were doing the course. And I was able to communicate with the student in real time if they were in the lab completing the wells. If they had a question, they could shoot me over a text, they could send me over a picture, and I could give them instant feedback. Also, they were loading a lot of that pictures and a lot of that information onto Canvas, so I could give them further instruction. And those are familiar with Canvas, you can put little notes in and around the pictures, and so they were able to improve their welds. One of the silver linings that I would like to share with this is a lot of the students that started that program, they're now completing their certificate of welding here at the main campus. They found it that they were able to complete those introductory welding courses, and they're now completing their certificate of welding here. So I think that's a really good success where we created a program where the students were able to access training and in training in such a way where not only would make them better in their career, but also in their education. With that, I'd like to just introduce Valika Walu, and she'll make her presentation.
Thank you very much, Larry, and good afternoon, everyone. Sorry, let me put my picture. I work for San Diego Continuing Education, which is California's largest provider of adult non-credit education. I am the program chair for the Adult Basic and Adult Secondary Education programs in SDCE. Because of our strong career training programs, most of our students will transition into CTE programs and or need basic skills support while completing their training programs. When COVID-19 caused our campuses to shut down, we were forced, ready or not, to deliver online content in a virtual space that our institution and our students were largely unprepared for. As program chair, I really wanted to get the voices of the faculty. So in polling them, I had noticed that many of them had similar experiences, even very similar to the ones that Larry just shared. Here's one such experience. Weak internet, we've all experienced it. One faculty says that my internet went off in the middle of a lecture a couple of times. The students were so kind and patient with me. They waited until I was able to log back in. They shouted and applauded, "She's back." They were happy, but for me, it was both frustrating and intimidating. I didn't feel like I was in control of the situation. This is in light of rushing to deliver online content, not knowing how to do certain things in that environment, and fumbling through with the technology. Many of us have heard these stories over and over again, so we can definitely relate to that. But here's the silver lining. She says, teaching remotely has provided me with a new teaching and learning platform. I have learned a lot about technology these past months. And it seems that all I have been afraid to explore or navigate suddenly became my daily practices. I'm still learning, but I think I face my fears headlong. She says, like a worm, I am gradually eating down my technological mountains. For the students, they are learning more about accepting challenges and making the best out of it. Students are able to navigate our new learning platform. They're able to share their work via Zoom, and deliver class presentations with the different types of technology that now we are aware of. Although there have been lots of challenges, students seem to have become happier with remote learning. And I just want to tell you that for everyone, we all know that our spring numbers dropped significantly as students were scrambling to try to acquire technology and devices and things like that. But by summer, people were beginning to get the hang of things. And we actually saw our numbers rebound during the summer. And in fact, some of our programs were having the best numbers they've had in a very long time. Working in this virtual space is not for everyone, nor is it for every course. But I have seen, as many of you have, that given the opportunity, forced or optional, both students and faculty can and will rise to the occasion. I have seen my department grow closer and stronger, functioning more as a solid unit. I have also seen greater interdepartmental collaborations as our institution tries to develop new processes and guidelines to support our students. As evident throughout the nation, the old guidelines and laws that we have, they don't necessarily support the students nor the faculty in this uncharted virtual space. So there must be change in order for us to change. And lastly, what excites me most about this new environment that we are in is that it has forced faculty and students to move faster and intentionally into this digital revolution that we're in, helping them develop the 21st century skills that are required to navigate the real world. And with that, we would like you to hear CTE ESL student Dulce Caldino de Novelis' experience. Thank you.
I'm working as a project assistant for LCIVICS and BESL departments. As all of you know, this has been a difficult and challenging time. From the perspective of a non-native English speaker, ESL, and CTE student, there are diverse challenges with distance education, such as the lack of affordable devices, as well as connectivity, the lack of technological knowledge and understanding of the online platforms. And finally, the lack of nonverbal cues and body language that are so crucial for understanding and maintain a good communication. As an ESL student, as well as an AMCP CTE student, while in class during this pandemic, I found that many of my classmates struggled to afford a device and internet to their financial situation. Other students were using their phones to attend class, which can make it difficult to absorb all that information. Many had a spotty internet that limit their ability to be involved completely. ESL students in the beginning levels were having trouble with understanding online media tools. INCP CTE students were having struggles to finish their certification because of the lack of computer and dedicated graphic design programs. Aside from all those challenges, ESL and CTE instructors develop accessible and responsive online content, and the district provide the necessary technological tools to guarantee the continuity of the learnings, which allow the ESL students to complete their courses and the CTE students to earn their certifications. In my case, my biggest struggle as non-native English speaker moving to an online environment was the lack of nonverbal cues that will help me to understand and maintain better communication. Through my INCP instructor guidance, I was able to adapt and take ownership of my own learning. Now, distance learning present me with an opportunity to change my perspective and take a negative and make it positive. During the quarantine, I was able to successfully complete my ANCP certification, which allowed me to navigate very difficult times in my life. In May, my family and I lost my grandfather to a heart attack, and 2 weeks after, my uncle to COVID-19. Sounds horrible, right? Well, it was. But here's where the story gets better. In the age of COVID, you could no longer gather to grieve. And as an important member of my family, I needed to do something. Fortunately for me, because of the INCP program, I was able to develop beautiful virtual prayer cards and professional videos, and I was able to organize Zoom meetings that gather the family from all over. My training at SDCE and experience allowed us to virtually get together and grieve. I can thank you enough for the training I received, especially to my INCP instructor, who gave me the flexibility to achieve successfully the learnings during this hard time, and who provide his support and kindness. So I recommend to all instructors to check on your students. Those couple minutes could make the difference, and the gesture of kindness and compassion with another human goes beyond technology. Let them know that they are appreciated, and then you, as an instructor, recognize their effort in this rough time. You never know what is happening behind the scenes during this pandemic. To the students, acknowledge all the effort that your instructors and institutions are doing to keep your learnings going. That's what makes us stronger. Well, when we respect and support each other, when we embrace the rough times, when we embrace our diversity and our challenges. My association with the district has touched so many people and helped guide them through a most difficult time. And for that, I say thank you. I wish nothing but the best for all of you, and I'm excited based on my experience of what the future holds for us. Stay well, and God bless.
And now we will hear from parent Jessica Wilson.
Bear with me. This is Jeanette. Just bear with me. Just give me a couple seconds to get Jessica Wilson up. I apologize to the attendees and my panelists because that was so powerful. We want to keep that feeling and the experience there. So just bear with me.
Jeanette, I hope you don't mind if I chime in. This is Renee Marshall.
Please.
I'd love to see more of our participants who are on right now write in the Q&A box about their experience with crisis learning and or intentional learning. So if you haven't had a chance to write that in the Q&A, please do so. Also, I see some people asking questions about a guidebook and some other things. Please know that we will absolutely get back to you about the questions that you're asking. If they are not asked within the session, just make sure your email is shared with us, and we will make sure that we write back to you. Also, I hope you don't mind, Jeanette, while you're still troubleshooting on that, there is somebody in the chat who was specifically talking about or asking about how CTE is done with welding in the virtual space. So I'm not sure if we have time for Larry to talk about that for a moment.
Yeah, I'll be happy to answer that. Or mainly, in the virtual space, there's a lot of tools that are available. Currently, I use it's called open source. It's called Miller Open Book, and it's a full like OER base with videos and quizzes and everything that it's 100% accessible online, and it's also compatible over tablet and including phone. So students are able to take their test and and do their homework doing that. Also, I did get a message in the chat like, how do we teach that? How do you teach welding? But the way we did it is that we had access to a local high school welding lab, so students were able to do their welding there in the high school lab, and then take photos or pictures and send them to me so I could look at them and give them some input, and they would go back the following week and improve on those welds.
Excellent, Larry. Before we get to the video, because the video is up and queued, can you mention about if there's hands-on tools that are required? Do you have any strategies for making sure that all the students have the actual tools they need?
Yes, in the lab, we provide everything that they need to do the basic welds. So, we have the hood, jacket, gloves, safety glasses, the basics that are needed to do an introductory welding class. So we provide that, including all the supplies, the rods that are needed, and steel and materials that are needed to do the basic welds. So they pretty much just can show up, and we have everything there waiting for them.
I love that, Larry. And as we look at possibly extending our time in this virtual space longer, we may need to look into K-12 or TK to 12 to look for strategies how we can make sure those tools are given to students in all areas of career technical education and all ages in career tech education. So we might get into a grab and go model or something different, but thank you so much, Larry, for reflecting on that. And with that, I will now hand it over to Tanette so she can introduce our next video.
Hi, my name is Jessica Wilson, and I have a son who is in a moderate severe special education class here in California, and I'm excited to talk to you guys today.
Great, thank you, Jessica, so much. Could you please give one current example of a difficulty in distance education?
Yes, I can. Through these last 6 months, there have been many difficulties with distance learning. The disruption of a schedule and routine has taken years to establish is a huge one. Also, many children with disabilities or unique needs, like my son, do not have the cognitive ability to understand what has happened and why they're being forced away from what they know that makes them comfortable. But what I want to focus on is the loss of independence. My son is losing key skills necessary for independent life. Brandon cannot log onto a computer. He struggles with sitting while online. He cannot read his schedule. He has poor fine motor skills that require hand-over-hand assistance. And these complications require me to assist him 100% all day. As he is having to rely on help with everything, he is losing the ability and confidence to do things on his own. I'm also not properly trained or educated in these skills that are best needed to assist him with services, for example, occupational therapy. Brandon requires a teacher, several aides, an occupational therapist, a speech therapist, and adaptive PE teacher to provide the needs and education he requires and deserves. While he is getting the voice and instruction from these people through virtual learning, I'm being required to be the hands of all of them. This is draining for my son and for me. Education in school, away from his parents, helps create the confidence and skills needed to gain independence. Without that environment, he is losing out on key developmental time.
Thank you so much for your response. For the second question today, please give one example of an opportunity that distance learning has provided you.
I have to say it was difficult to find an opportunity that distance learning has provided. There have been many struggles, but I will say that distance learning has provided the opportunity for me to observe my son's learning. I have gained a greater understanding of how he learns. I have also been able to witness him doing things that I did not know he was able to do. I have seen the incredible work that his teacher has put in and the amazing way that she can tailor the lessons to fit the various needs of children in his class. One specific opportunity has been the individual sessions that she has been provided for each child. Brandon has 2 30-minute sessions a week with his teacher or an aide to work on his specific IEP learning goals. This one-on-one time has been vital for his learning. The one-on-one setting has helped him to be more engaged and provide a greater opportunities of learning. He has a comfort and trust with his teachers, and having that special one-on-one time has been very special for him.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts and perspectives. It's greatly appreciated. Is there anything else that you would like to share with anybody who's watching the webinar today, or anybody from the Department of Ed who's interested in knowing more about the virtual space for our special populations, including our students in the special education?
I would just like to say that we as parents all understand that things are changing regularly and that new regulations are coming out all the time. We are patient and we are understanding of that. I would like to say that communication is huge, especially with special needs parents. We're in very uncharted territory. We're used to having specialists, aides, people to tell us what to do and what's the best way to provide assistance. And a lot of us have had that since our children were born. And now that's being sort of completely taken away. I mean, it's been being provided in a virtual environment, but the teachers that do the most communication with the parents about what we can do to help and what they can do to help have been very beneficial. And the ones that are not communicating, sometimes we feel like we're underwater. So I would say communication with parents is really vital at this time.
Thank you so much for your voice today. It's greatly appreciated. And thank you for sharing your son's voice as well and his story. Thank you so much, Jessica.
Thank you.
And now we'll hear from CTE Administrator Renee Marshall.
Hi, everybody. I have had the opportunity to serve in both our K-12 system and in the community college system. And so it's a pleasure to talk with everybody today about career technical education with special populations and what it looks like. Because moving forward, things have been really different in the last couple months. We really moved from this idea of the crisis learning into intentional learning. And I love how people in the chat box are talking about this. A lot still feel like they're experiencing both, but that's okay, because this is a pandemic and we are in uncharted territory. And that's fine, because we're all going to make it through this together. A huge part of this is having a really positive attitude and really collaborating and coming together. In terms of a challenge that's related to what's happening right now, the first thing I think of is a lot of us have concerns about academic gaps. We have concerns that our students won't get what they need for the workforce or for their future life. And so I'm actually going to dial that back, because I think the academic gap is not as huge of a concern as the emotional, social, relational gap that we will see. We are already seeing. And the thing about this, in terms of this relational gap, is we're seeing it at every single age. We're seeing it with our college students. We're seeing it with our high school students. We are absolutely even seeing it with the youngest of our students that are engaging in career technical education. So, so that's a challenge, but I'm also going to say it's a positive, it's a silver lining, because it is harder for people to make friendships and to engage in a virtual space. It has really challenged us to kind of rethink about the relational side of education and how we can connect with people. We're seeing professors do things and teachers do things that are so incredibly inventive. In higher education, we have professors that are meeting with small groups, they're meeting one-on-one with students, their accessibility has been extended significantly. We used to have a few hours of office hours each week, and now it really has expanded because we know that it is essential to be accessible as much as possible. In addition to that, we're also seeing in K-12 the relational side change a bit. We saw that there's definitely been some challenges, but the teachers have been incredibly inventive with how they're working with students. We have teachers that will communicate one-on-one or engage in small groups with the students, but we are also seeing teachers do things that are really very new, dropping off things at student houses or putting together and preparing packages or materials or supplies for their students and having those students come to the school site to pick it up. We really have to reimagine what career tech education is going to look like moving forward. And more importantly, we really need to focus on our special populations. If somebody doesn't have their basic needs met, then how are we to teach them? How are they to learn? And so when we're looking at the relational side of all that we're doing, it really is such an essential piece. So right now, we want to focus on collaboration. We want to focus on communication. We want students to engage in communities where they can get the support they need, and we also want teachers and faculty to engage in the groups that will help them to be successful right now. We all have to break out of silos. If you're a parent, reach out and let's help. If you're a faculty member, reach out. If you are a K-12 teacher, reach out, because we are looking for solutions. And I wish I could say we have every strategy and solution in place right now. This is a learning moment where we are still transitioning what things are going to look like moving forward. But a couple just quick FYIs in case people don't know. If you're looking for a way to build additional strategies, please consider going to Distance Learning Educators, which is a Facebook site that has popped up during the pandemic that has over 22,000 educators on it. It's worldwide now too, even though the majority of those on this group are coming from California, different areas of California, but it's a truly fantastic place where you can pop up a question and suddenly a ton of people will answer. You're trying to figure out how to get this certain resource to kids. It's not just one person working in a silo. You're instead putting it out to 22,000 colleagues and saying, I need some help. Can you help me? Excellent. I'm sorry, I just noticed the chat too. I know we're going to be moving on to the next slide. And so we really want to make sure that we emphasize that relational side of it. Another thing too, as we are looking at remote learning for career technical education, we are talking about this idea of hope, the idea of reimagining education and what it's going to look like moving forward. And I will tell you what's going to happen next. The next wave of education is going to be focusing on humanizing virtual learning. And it has to, because we had to flip over into this virtual world literally overnight. And that's okay. We've done the best we can. But now as we're looking at schools and programs that are looking at extending to the online, being in the online space for the remainder of the school year, or, going back in January or whatever the plan is, we know that not many people are going back right at this minute. And so while we're still in a remote space, we need to think about this concept of how do we connect key leaders and stakeholders in online learning to come together. We need to create this movement of humanity where we are really looking at online learning, all the different platforms, all the curriculum, everything we do. But how do we do it in a meaningful way where every single person that's engaged will feel connected, will feel inspired, and will feel like they can be successful in the virtual space? So as we look forward for what things will look like moving, as we continue to develop, we really need to think about how do we humanize this space? How do we humanize virtual learning? And how do we make sure that this is a place of equity where we are providing opportunities for teachers and faculty and students, no matter what system they are in, no matter what class they are taking, no matter if they are in a CTE class or another class, and also no matter if they're in private school or public school. When we are looking at the well-being of California and California's workforce, we really need to be considering every single possible variable. So with that, we're going to go back to Tanette Salter, our lead of the group, for a little bit of Q&A to see if anybody has any questions and comments that they want to on the line. But we want you to make sure that in your head and your heart, you realize that moving forward, we're looking at leading with kindness, we're looking at leading with grace, but we're also really looking at the human side of virtual learning. And how do we get to that core of humanity? So that way people are able to move forward with their academic goals, but as important, they are moving forward with their relational, their personal, their social, emotional development. So with that, I will hand it over to Tanette Salter.
Thank you, Renee, and thank you all panelists. What a terrific job that you did, and I hope that the people that are on this webinar, looks from the Q&A, that they walk out of here with an outcome and walk out with them being human first instead of the teacher, instead of the mother, instead of the parent, that you are a human first who has feelings, who have has bravery to stick up when something isn't right, has bravery when something is uncomfortable to make that change. And that's what we're talking about, humanity first. I do want to allow time for us to have a Q&A, but I do want to do a quick plug-in on JSPAC. JSPAC normally does an annual equity conference, but this year, because we've been so thoughtful in thinking about the human experience, considering all of the health crisis, as well as the magnified sequential racist acts that's going on, and as well as leadership. Leadership is very different and is going to change. So we're in this beautiful chaos, to me, as a society, as a world, and humans is first out of that. And so JSPAC's whole year this year for 2021 is a humanity approach, and we will be doing 3 sessions in December on what is humanity approach in education. We'll do another dive in a deliberation session on humanizing virtual learning, and then humanizing data. What's the story? How do you look at the data and tell the story? And then make sure that the story has the outcome that's aligned with that particular being, which is that authentic learning experience that we're talking about. And that embodies equitable education. I'm gonna leave it there and open up Q&A.
Thanks, Tanette. And I'm gonna actually start with a question that's been repeated throughout. And I think Brian put a really solid solution question in our chat to this. So the majority of our attendees are in the K-12 space, and they have absolutely no access to their hands-on labs. They can't get kids in there. They can't, many of them can't even get in there themselves. And so what are some possible solutions? And maybe this, Brian, you had shared in the chat to the panelists that there was a partnership solution that had come up. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that and help some of the K-12 educators see the potential of virtual learning with a subject such as welding.
Yeah, sure. I think it's kind of a 2-part answer, so I'll defer part 2 of that to Larry and Terry, who are also on the call. But our virtual welding started prior to COVID. So we got a National Science Foundation grant to look at equitable access to courses, specifically hands-on courses. What's more hands-on than welding, right? So we thought, how can we deliver this in a place where we don't have a lab, and we don't have the equipment, and those students who want to take this class, if they are able to take it, that means they're driving an hour and 10 minutes to Coalinga to our lab. So we basically came up with this plan where we would put, which isn't new at this point, this is a 2-year-old grant, all lecture went online asynchronous. And you know, we still have chats and things like that with the instructors. But the hands-on approach was done really 2 ways. We used virtual welding equipment at our facility, and I say facility, it's an old bowling alley, converted into some classrooms, so it's certainly not a welding lab. We used a virtual welder at that facility and let students come in and go out, kind of like it was any other computer lab. There was somebody staffed there, for X amount of time, and students would come in, do their virtual welds, and then they would send that information to their instructor directly from the virtual welding machine. And then we also, from a grant prior to that, we had a we had a welding trailer, which was a mobile trailer that had about 8 welding units in it. So we were able to deploy that in different communities as long as there was enough, the electricity was set up for it. But the partnership with the high school is really what became key. That partnership between the college and the high school to offer these classes, which I think Terry will talk about. Are you there, Terry?
Yes, I am.
Great.
So what we really needed was a place to actually have welders, student welders, actually participate in welding activities. But the idea was that the instructor would be at the home site and the student welders would be at a remote site, distance. Firebaugh is about an hour away, and that's a long enough distance, and there is enough transportation issues where the original 12 students that took the lab in Firebaugh did not have transportation to Coalinga. So there's no way they could have taken that course in Coalinga. So they were very appreciative of the fact that they could take this class. So the welding facilities was there. We had the virtual welder was also placed there, so the students could learn with that remotely with communications with the instructor. A lot of the issues that we had, though, dealt with the internet. Poor access to the internet within the school and poor broadband service around the school also. And it very much limited the ability to communicate between the student and the instructor. But as Larry talked about before, we worked through a lot of that solutions where we were able to provide some success to the students. We want to be able to extend that. Now the problem is that you still cannot do welding complete virtual. It's similar to truck driving or heavy equipment where the students have to sit in the seat and actually experience. But what we can do is alleviate some of those transportation issues, the remote issues. We can still try to deal with those. Currently, what we're trying to do is develop a relationship with another high school that wants to give this a try. We're looking for partners that want to teach or be a remote lab site for this grant, and we would place a virtual welder at the location and pay for supplies and materials just to see how this distance ed for welding works, the model that we try to develop. And this would be a high school that maybe doesn't have access to these to an instructor or college courses that we would be offering.
Great, thank you for that. And I think the struggle right now too, like I mentioned, is there's no in-person anything allowed in many communities and classrooms. And so teachers that have been lab dependent, even if it's, the student having to go to a virtual lab, that's not even allowed. Everything has to be sent home. And so I think it's a struggle. But it is really good to hear that there are some solutions for small groups using virtual lab spaces. And once schools, once face-to-face is allowed, that is a very helpful solution. So thank you for sharing that. There's a question, I think we're right at 4 o'clock, but I am going to address, there's one more question that was about, hang on, I got to find it. It's way up here. There's a lot of great questions. And so what we can do is I can deliver these questions to our panel and they can respond to these questions and we can send the Q&A out to participants. We've had to do that with some other some other webinars. And so I will do that. But there was a great question about subgroups, and I have to find it.
Hello, Allison. This is Larry. I did
Hi, Larry.
read one about kits, or how their students are doing their hands-on work. And what I wanted to share is that what I've done is I'm currently teaching a lab, and we're doing it, of course, groups of 10, social distanced, and we do it outdoors, and everybody has social distance apart. But I also have created kits for labs. So the kits are all, it's material, if they need a hammer or nails or whatever they need, it's all put together. And of course, I evaluate the students. If some are able to finish at home, and some need a little bit more one-on-one. So that's what the lab time is for. But what I've done in this situation we're in, I've re-looked over all my labs, and I know as instructors, we kind of get comfortable because we have everything we need, what's in the room. But I've kind of looked, how are they going to finish this at the house, or how are they going to finish it in their backyard? So I've actually restructured some labs that would make them successful, and making sure that if they're going to put this together, they can do it 100% by themselves in the home. And if they need a tool, then we do that lab, or we do it, in the lab setting.
Thank you, Larry. And maybe you'd be willing to share some of those components, because I think that would be really helpful for our audience as well. And I might connect with you directly about that, if that's okay. So the question that I was looking for was the playbook question, actually. And there was a follow-up statement that was made that Renee just shared with me, but the question was about learning playbooks, or actual tangible sample resources that shares best practice for teaching students with special needs, English language learners, foster and homeless youth. And we'll end on this question, because I think this is, that what's next question. So does there anybody who wants to take this specifically? Renee, you mentioned something about this earlier.
I'll take it first, and then Renee can chime in. This is Tanette, and JSPAC saw a vision when COVID came out that this is needed, that a guidebook needs to be created that crosswalks both through 12 and adult education, as well as community and college. And Renee Marshall, we have hired Renee Marshall to be that consultant to lead that project on what that guidebook should be, on best strategies. This is the first of the first webinars, just so happened to align with the topic of us working on what is an authentic virtual learning experience that will include terminology, terms that we just mentioned, that will include the merry, meaningful, engageful, relational, and relevant and insightful model, and how to do that and align that with some of the strategies that we heard from Larry today. I saw in the Q&A that there was somebody from Maine that is doing some intentional learning and crisis remote learning. We would love to hear from you to include that in this guidebook. As Renee mentioned, we can no longer work in silos. And I also want to address that one of the questions said, do we have any solutions and strategies? And it's fluid. We're reimagining this together. And although we are educators and we want that absolute answer and solution so that we can move forward, I think Larry said it so well and eloquently, and maybe he doesn't realize this, that he reimagined his lab to what it would look like in the home of his students, instead of the lab in the classroom. And if Renee, if you want to piggyback off of that, you can, but jspac.californiaperkins.com, she is looking for stakeholders. She is looking for feedback in creating this guidebook that will be shared with all.
And I appreciate you talking about the guidebook, Tanette, and talking about how things are really fluid right now. Because yes, there are strategies. Yes, we have, I don't know if we have solutions yet. There are strategies, but one thing is this is so live that it's like things haven't been fully created yet. And within our systems, it takes a while to vet information and publish it and whatnot. But I do, earlier I mentioned distance learning educators. And for those of you in K-12 in particular, please, and I know I'm old, I'm on Facebook, so that's where I am. But guess what? Distance Learning Educators is there. There's 22,000 people there. And the thing that's beautiful about that is you can say, I am a high school teacher teaching a dual enrollment nursing class, and I'm looking for this. And people are helping right away. And I just give that as an example because what I do is I train people to be teachers, both in K-12 and in early childhood. And what we have done since May is our groups through the community college system, we've created 2 different communities of practice where we have literally brought in stakeholders across the state to work together on creating virtual resources and whatnot. So if anybody is training teachers or preschool teachers, I've got resources for you. But what we're seeing is these resources are being developed subject area by subject area by subject area, which is great because if you go on the Distance Learning Educators Facebook site, you can say you're specific and get help and get collaboration and get resources instantly. What we're going to be doing through the Humanizing Virtual Learning Project through Joint Special Populations is really creating an umbrella of a guidebook that's going to be usable for everybody, no matter what subject area you're in. But just know right now, in terms of deliverables and having like a concrete, tangible guidebook, it's still like we are building the plane as we are flying it, but we're flying it. So it's just a matter of coming together to find those resources. So I'm sorry that I can't give one specific resource at this moment, but know that this is an emerging area and know that really moving forward, we're really going to be emphasizing the humanization of virtual learning and what it's going to look like for our students, but in particular our CTE students. And all of you who are CTE faculty who are on right now, I get this because like for those of us that train people to be teachers, we don't have access to any physical classrooms right now, or virtually no physical classrooms. And so how do we make that happen? It is completely reimagining what education is. Also to anybody thinking like, oh, can't we get back to how it used to be? Education will never be as it was. It will only be as it is moving forward. And I think that's really important because it's an opportunity. It's a silver lining. Right now, we're having discussions about equity, about access that we haven't had. And so while the pandemic has been an absolute challenge, please also know and hold on to the silver linings that come out of it. And in the end, we have to remember we are all human and we are here to serve our kids, whether our kids and our students are in 7th grade CTE, culinary class, or they're a nursing student at a community college that's working on becoming a physical assistant. They are all valuable and we are all working together. So if you are siloed right now, I challenge you, break out of your silo. Our emails are on this presentation. It'll be loaded to it was shared where it's loaded on the chat. It's going to be loaded onto the JSPAC website. The JSPAC email has been shared via the Q&A. Please reach out to us because no one should be siloed right now. In order to not just survive, but to thrive, we all need to be working together. So with that, we're going to pull up our last slide and I'll have Tanette give a thank you to everybody, but thanks so much for me and for listening to us today. Appreciate it.
Yeah, and I want to extend a thank you to all of our panelists. Thanks so much for joining us and being a part of our series, our distance learning series for Career Tech Ed, and we are honored to have had you here today. So much appreciation, and I look forward to working with you all.
Thank you, and congratulations, you guys, for staying with us for this hour. So much more to talk about and so much more to do. Looking forward to, hopefully, you saw the JSPAC Gmail email account. Please, as Renee said, please, this is a work in progress. We need your input. We definitely
something on chat we have to address, and I apologize that I didn't see it earlier. Somebody asked, what is a silo? A silo is when you are like the lone person on the island working by yourself, thinking that you have to do this all by yourself. You don't, because right now there's literally thousands of us across the state that are trying to figure this out. And we want to talk with you. We want to hear your frustrations, because that's how we're going to be able to move forward, and to move forward, as I mentioned, not surviving, but thriving. So I'm sorry to chime in with that, Tanette, but I just saw that question in the chat and I'm like, oh, we got to make sure we address that one.
Great. Thank you all for attending and have a great afternoon.
Thank you.